Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Done, I took her apartment keys. Now she'll have to call and beg to be let in. At 7:30 p.m., her husband came home from work and froze. The entire stairwell was covered with his belongings, and his mother was crying on a bench by the entrance. Son, she changed the locks. We have nowhere to go. Esperanza had always believed that the most important thing in a marriage was trust. Not holiday bouquets, not romantic dinners, but the certainty that the person beside you was yours, that he stood on your side, that there were no secrets between you eating the relationship from within like rust eats metal. 3 years ago, when she married Aurelio, she truly thought she had found that kind of man, calm, reliable, even-tempered. An engineer at a factory, always came home on time, didn't drink, didn't chase after women. A perfect husband, if you believed all those women's forums that constantly complained about useless men. Esperanza had bought the apartment herself long before she met Aurelio. A 2-bedroom place in a high-rise on the edge of the city. Nothing fancy, but hers, earned through years of translating from English and German, through sleepless nights spent on technical documents that turned her brain inside out. She remembered every dollar she had put into those walls, remembered signing the papers with shaking hands because she was so happy. Aurelio moved in after the wedding, registered his address there, filled the closets with his things, hung his jackets in the hallway. Esperanza never imagined she'd come to regret it. The first 2.5 years passed quietly. Work, chores, occasional weekend trips to the countryside. Remedios, her mother-in-law, lived separately in a tiny 1-bedroom across the city. She visited once a month, sat in the kitchen in her usual superior pose, drank tea, and made it clear in every gesture that the apartment was fine, sure, but could definitely be better. Esperanza tolerated it. After all, she was the man's mother, and fighting with her over trifles seemed foolish. But a month ago something changed. At first Esperanza thought it was just exhaustion. She happened to have a massive urgent job, a 300-page contract that needed to be translated. The deadline was tight. The client called every day. She worked late into the night and barely paid attention to Aurelio. And when she finally lifted her head from the computer, she noticed that her husband had become different. Not in appearance, he still looked the same, tall, a little stooped, neatly trimmed hair. But his eyes had changed. They carried a guilty look. The kind children have when they're caught stealing cookies from the jar but still believe they're right. A mix of shame and stubbornness. Aurelio talked less. He used to always share news from work, who fought with whom in the workshop, which boss yelled at which foreman. Now he came home, muttered a short hi, ate silently, and buried himself in his phone. When she asked questions, he answered in monosyllables. How's work? Fine. Did something happen? No. Esperanza chalked it up to tiredness. Everyone has phases when they don't want to talk and just need some quiet. She was like that herself. But something inside her kept nagging. Another strange thing, Aurelio started coming home exactly at 7:30 every evening. Before, the time varied, sometimes 7, sometimes 8, sometimes even 6 if his boss let him go early. Now it was always precisely 19:30, as if on schedule. Esperanza even checked the clock a few times when the door clicked. The hands pointed to exactly 7:30, as if he were waiting for something or someone. One morning, after Aurelio had already left for work, Esperanza noticed her favorite mug wasn't in its usual place. White, with blue flowers, bought back in her student days. She always kept it on the top left shelf, but now it sat on the lower shelf next to the regular cups. A small thing, of course, but Esperanza was meticulous. Everything in the house had its place, and Aurelio knew that. He never touched her mug. She picked it up, turned it in her hands, looked inside. Clean. But at the bottom there was a faint tea stain. Someone had used it recently. Aurelio must have taken it, Esperanza muttered, though even she didn't sound convinced. Or I moved it myself and forgot. But the uneasy feeling wouldn't leave her. In the next few days she noticed other little things. The towel in the bathroom was hanging differently. The hallway smelled faintly of someone else's perfume, a sweet, airy scent that wasn't hers. The wardrobe door in the bedroom was slightly open, though Esperanza always closed it tightly. She started thinking she was going crazy. Maybe she really was overworked. Maybe it was time for a vacation if she was already hallucinating. And then the thing happened that changed everything. It was an ordinary Tuesday. Esperanza got ready to go grocery shopping, vegetables for the week, milk, bread. She dressed, grabbed her bag, left the building, walked about 200 meters and realized she'd forgotten her phone. She turned around and went back, opened the building door, climbed to the third floor, took out her keys, slid one into the lock. The door opened silently. She had oiled the hinges recently. She stepped into the hallway, took off her jacket, and heard a voice from the living room. "Well then, let's see what we have here." Esperanza froze. A woman's voice. Familiar. Remedios. For a few seconds she couldn't move, trying to grasp what was happening. Her mother-in-law, here, in the middle of the day. Aurelio was at work. She herself had just left. How had Remedios gotten in? Esperanza slowly walked down the corridor and stopped in the doorway of the living room. At the table, the one that usually held a fruit bowl, sat her mother-in-law. In front of her were spread out Esperanza's documents, the very ones she kept in the dresser. The property certificate, the purchase contract, the registry extract. Remedios held Esperanza's favorite blue-flowered mug and was calmly drinking tea while studying the papers. Her glasses on a chain had slid down her nose. She looked completely at ease, as if she were at home. Remedios. Esperanza's voice was quieter than she intended. Her mother-in-law looked up. Not a hint of embarrassment, only mild irritation, as if she had been interrupted in the middle of something important. "Oh, Esperanza," she smiled, but the smile never reached her eyes. "I decided to check whose name the apartment is under. After all, Aurelio is my son. And you've only lived here for 3 years." Esperanza felt something tighten inside her. She walked to the table, gathered the documents from under Remedios' hands. Her mother-in-law didn't resist, only watched her. "This is my apartment," Esperanza said slowly, clearly. "I bought it with my own money 2 years before the wedding. Aurelio is only registered here." "Yes, of course." Her mother-in-law took a sip of tea and placed the cup down. "But you're a family now, and in a family everything is shared, isn't it? I just wanted to make sure my Aurelio is secure. You never know." Esperanza gathered the documents, pressed them against her chest. Dozens of questions raced through her mind. How had she gotten in? Where did she get the keys? How long had this been going on? "Where did you get the keys to my apartment?" Remedios shrugged, as if Esperanza had asked about the weather. "Aurelio gave them to me. I asked, and he gave them. I'm his mother, I'm allowed. I wanted to help clean while you were at work. There's dust on the shelves, the plants aren't watered. I did it all carefully, don't worry." Esperanza said nothing. The word stuck in her throat. She stared at her mother-in-law, unable to believe what she was hearing. Remedios sat in her home, drank from her mug, rummaged through her documents, and talked about it as if she were doing a favor. "I didn't ask you to come," Esperanza managed finally, "and I didn't ask you to clean. Please give me back the keys." Her mother-in-law smirked. "Aurelio has the keys, talk to him. I have nothing to do with it. He offered it himself, by the way, said it would be easier for you if I helped around the house." Esperanza turned and went to the bedroom. She put the documents into the safe that stood in the wardrobe, locked it, and returned to the living room. Remedios was still sitting at the table, finishing her tea. "I have to go." Esperanza picked up her bag and took out her phone. "Please leave as well. And don't come again without an invitation." Her mother-in-law stood up slowly and straightened her skirt. "Oh, Esperanza, why so serious? I'm not a stranger. We're family, after all." Fine, I'll go. Just water the flowers on the windowsill, otherwise they'll wilt completely." She walked past Esperanza, threw on her coat in the hallway, and left without saying goodbye. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Esperanza was left standing in the middle of the living room. Her head was in chaos. So that's where the odd little things came from. That's where the foreign smell, the moved items, the cup out of place had come from. Remedios had been coming here while Esperanza was at work. She had come with keys Aurelio had given her, and she had been doing her own thing here. Esperanza took out her phone and checked the time. 2:30. Aurelio wouldn't be back until 7:30. She needed to talk to him, calmly, without emotion, to figure out what was going on. She spent the rest of the day in a kind of stupor. She did go to the store after all and bought groceries. She came home, put the purchases in the fridge, sat down at the computer, but she couldn't work. The words blurred before her eyes. Her thoughts were a mess. She kept trying to understand. Why had Aurelio given his mother the keys and not told her? Why hide it? If Remedios really wanted to help with the cleaning, why didn't she ask Esperanza herself? At 7:30 the front door banged. Aurelio came in as usual, hung up his jacket, and took off his shoes. "Hi," he tossed out as he headed to the kitchen. Esperanza stood by the window, arms crossed over her chest. "Aurelio, we need to talk." He stopped and turned. His face tightened. "About what?" "Today I came home and found your mother in our apartment. She was sitting at the table, drinking tea, and rummaging through my documents. Aurelio was silent. Then he shrugged. So what? She's not a stranger. I gave her the keys, asked her to drop by and help with the cleaning. You're constantly at work. The place is a mess. I thought it would be easier for you. Esperanza felt the heat rise inside but held herself in check. Aurelio, this is my apartment. If you wanted someone to help with the cleaning, you should have asked me first, not given out keys behind my back. What difference does it make? Mom just wanted to help. Help? She was digging through my apartment papers. Do you think that's normal? Aurelio turned away, walked into the kitchen, and opened the fridge. You're probably exaggerating. Mom just worries about us. She wants to make sure everything's in order. Esperanza followed him into the kitchen. Aurelio, some money is missing. $30 from the bedroom wardrobe. I kept it there just in case. It's gone. He turned, looking at her with irritation. And you think Mom stole it? Seriously? Esperanza, you probably spent it and forgot, or moved it somewhere. I didn't forget. I remember exactly that the money was there. Well, I don't know. He waved a hand. Maybe you really did forget. Mom wouldn't do that. This is your imagination. Esperanza looked at him and didn't recognize him. This was her husband, the man she'd lived with for 3 years. But now he stood before her defending his mother instead of at least trying to understand her. Fine. Esperanza turned and went to the bedroom. Then I want you to take her keys back. She is not to come here without notice. She won't come if it upsets you so much, he called after her, but I'm not taking her keys. She's my mother. She has the right to visit her son. Esperanza lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Inside, everything was boiling. She realized the conversation was pointless. Aurelio wasn't hearing her. He had already taken his mother's side, which meant the story was only beginning. In the following days, Esperanza lived as if under a microscope. She began to notice what she had previously overlooked, small details that added up to an unsettling picture. For example, on Wednesday evening she discovered that her pearl earrings, which lay in the jewelry box on the dressing table, had disappeared. Not the most expensive, but her favorite. A gift from her grandmother for her 18th birthday. Esperanza turned the bedroom upside down, checked every box, the pockets of her clothes. Nothing. Aurelio shrugged when she asked if he had seen the earrings. Maybe you lost them somewhere, or moved them and forgot. That phrase again, moved them and forgot, as if she had memory lapses. On Friday, a bottle of expensive French perfume went missing. Esperanza had received it as a gift from a client for an especially difficult translation. It wasn't cheap, and she used it only on special occasions. The bottle stood on the bathroom shelf, in its place. And on Friday it was gone. Esperanza asked her husband. He didn't even look up from his phone. No idea, maybe you put it somewhere. Over the weekend, Esperanza stayed home alone. Aurelio went to his mother's, said he needed to fix a leaky kitchen tap. Esperanza sat at the computer trying to finish another project, but her thoughts kept circling the same thing. What if Remedios was coming here regularly? What if she wasn't just helping with the cleaning, but doing something else? On Sunday evening, when Aurelio returned, Esperanza brought it up again. Aurelio, tell me honestly, how often does your mother come here when I'm not home? He hesitated and looked away. Well, sometimes, I don't know, a couple of times a month, maybe. A couple of times a month? Well, yeah. Or a bit more often. I haven't counted. She just drops by to check if everything's okay. You know she worries. Esperanza clenched her fists. A couple of times a month, or a bit more often, meant at least once a week, maybe more. And he thought that was normal. Aurelio, I don't want her coming without my knowledge. This is my apartment. I have the right to know who's been here. All right, he waved her off. I'll tell her to call beforehand. But Esperanza knew he wouldn't. She could see it on his face, and the way he avoided her eyes. Aurelio didn't think he was doing anything wrong. To him, his mother had every right to come into their home whenever she wanted. On Monday morning, after Aurelio left for work, Esperanza made a decision. She ordered a small camera online, one disguised as a simple phone charger. Delivery was promised in 2 days. On Tuesday, while Esperanza was at work, something else happened. She came home at 6 in the evening and immediately sensed that someone had been there. The same Swedish smell hung in the air as before, a foreign scent that definitely belonged neither to her nor Aurelio. Esperanza walked through the apartment, looking around the rooms. In the kitchen sink was a cup, her favorite one, with the blue flowers. Wet. Someone had used it just recently. In the bedroom, the wardrobe door was slightly open. Esperanza always closed it tightly. She walked over and swung it open fully. Her dresses were not hanging the way she had left them. One of them, a dark green one she reserved for important meetings, was in the wrong place, hanging next to her everyday clothes. Esperanza took the dress off the hanger and held it to her face. The smell, that same sweetish, foreign scent. Someone had tried it on. A wave of fury rose inside her, so sharp it stole her breath for a moment. She laid the dress on the bed and took out her phone. She wanted to call Aurelio, to tell him everything, but stopped. What was the point? He would only say she was exaggerating, that his mother just wanted to help. Esperanza put her phone back in her pocket. She took a deep breath and let it out slowly. She needed to calm down. She needed to wait for the camera to arrive. Then she would have proof. On Wednesday, the courier delivered the package. Esperanza unpacked it and set up the camera according to the instructions. It turned out to be easier than she expected. The camera recorded onto a memory card and activated with motion. Esperanza placed it in the living room, on the bookshelf, disguised as a charger. It looked completely ordinary, impossible to distinguish from a real one. On Thursday morning, Esperanza left for work as usual. Aurelio left even earlier. The apartment remained empty. That evening, when she returned, she checked the camera first, downloaded the recording to her laptop, and opened the file. What she saw made her freeze. On the screen was the living room. The timestamp showed 10 a.m. Remedios appeared in the frame. She entered confidently, took off her coat, hung it in the hallway, and went to the kitchen. Then she came back into the living room holding Esperanza's favorite cup. She walked over to the dresser and opened the drawers one by one, methodically. She took out papers and photographed them with her phone. Esperanza recognized some of them: bank statements, her apartment purchase contract, old receipts. Remedios put the papers down and closed the drawer. She went into the bedroom. The camera couldn't see her there, but the rustling sound of closet doors opening was clear. A few minutes later she returned. In her hands was Esperanza's dark green dress. She held it up to herself, looked in the wall mirror, tried it on, smiled, and shook her head. Wrong size, she muttered to herself. Well, no matter, I'll lose some weight. Esperanza felt cold inside. Remedios said it as casually as if she were commenting on a dress in a store. Remedios put the dress back. She went into the bathroom, again out of view. After a minute she returned, holding a perfume bottle, the French one that had gone missing. She sprayed it on her wrist, smelled it deeply. Nice, she nodded. Good thing I took it. She slipped the bottle into her purse. Esperanza paused the recording and leaned back in her chair. Her head buzzed. So it wasn't her imagination. Remedios had really been coming into the apartment, rummaging through her things, taking what she liked, acting as if she had every right. Esperanza fast-forwarded. Remedios continued to wander around the apartment, opening closet doors, checking shelves. At some point she went back into the bedroom, out of sight of the camera, but the audio kept recording. Soon all of this will be mine, Remedios' voice said. Aurelio will divorce that splinter, and I'll move in here. Then I'll finally live like a normal person, not in that tiny one-room place where you can't even turn around. Esperanza squeezed her eyes shut, rewound, and played it again. The words were clear, unmistakable. Soon all of this will be mine. Aurelio will divorce that splinter, and I'll move in here. So that was it. Remedios didn't just want to help. She wanted to push Esperanza out of her own apartment. And Aurelio, judging by everything, knew about it. Esperanza copied the recording onto a flash drive and uploaded it to the cloud. Then she checked the rest of the files. The camera had recordings for every day. And every time Esperanza wasn't home, Remedios came. One day she rummaged through drawers and took the pearl earrings. Another day she tried on Esperanza's shoes and took the high-heeled ones. Another time she photographed the contents of the medicine cabinet. Each visit lasted about an hour. Remedios behaved like the rightful owner inspecting her property. Esperanza closed the laptop and rubbed her face with her hands. She was furious, but forced herself to stay calm. She had proof now. She just had to decide what to do with it. Show it to Aurelio? What would be the point? He wouldn't believe it. He'd say it was edited, that she set it up to make his mother look bad. But at least now she knew the truth. She knew she wasn't losing her mind, that the missing items and strange details weren't her imagination. The next day, Esperanza decided to check how often Aurelio gave his mother keys. She waited until he went to shower and then looked into his jacket hanging in the hallway. In the pocket was a keyring, a normal one, with a little car keychain. Esperanza turned it in her hands and studied it. There were more keys than necessary. keys to the apartment, the car, the garage, and another keyring, a spare set. 2 keys on a separate ring. Esperanza took out her phone and photographed the keyring, then put it back. That evening, after Aurelio went to bed, she sat at her computer and began searching for information. How often can someone make key duplicates? How much does it cost? Is the owner's permission required? The answers were discouraging. Duplicates could be made at almost any locksmith. No permission needed, which meant Remedios could easily have her own set of keys. Esperanza opened the camera recordings again and rewatched the moment when her mother-in-law entered. Yes, she took the keys out of her own purse. Her own keys, not one she had borrowed from Aurelio, which meant she really did have her own copy. On Saturday, when Aurelio again went to his mother's, Esperanza decided to inspect the apartment more carefully. She walked through every room, checked every corner, and found something interesting. In the bathroom, on the shelf under the mirror, stood small jars of cream, expensive ones, judging by the packaging. Esperanza didn't use these, hers were stored in the cabinet. She picked up one, opened it. The smell was the same Swedish one she kept noticing lately. The label had a price, $50. Esperanza put the jar back. So Remedios had already begun settling in. She had brought her own things, arranged them on the shelves as if preparing to move in. On the hook in the bathroom hung a bathrobe, light beige, with embroidery on the pocket. Esperanza had never seen it before. She took it down and checked the size. Size 52, not hers. In the hallway, on the top shelf of the closet, was a shoebox. Esperanza took it down and opened it. Inside were slippers. Large, soft, pink house slippers, clearly not her size, too big. Esperanza put the box back. She felt sick. Remedios wasn't just dropping by. She was moving in. Slowly, quietly, but methodically. Bringing her things, arranging them around the apartment, settling into the space. And Aurelio, judging by everything, knew about it or was even helping. Esperanza went back to the living room and sat on the couch. Thoughts raced one after another. What should she do? Throw the mother-in-law out? Talk to Aurelio again? But what was the point if he was on his mother's side? She took out her phone, opened the camera recordings, and watched them again. She saved the most incriminating fragments. Maybe they would be useful someday. On Sunday evening, Aurelio returned. He looked pleased, almost happy. How was the trip? Esperanza asked, trying to keep her voice even. Fine, helped Mom, fixed her sink. She sends you greetings, by the way. Esperanza nodded without replying. Inside she was boiling, but she held herself together. That evening, once Aurelio went to sleep, Esperanza sat down with her laptop again. She opened the recordings and scrolled to the right moment. Remedios stood in the middle of the living room, looking around the room, talking to herself. I'll throw out this sofa, it's ugly. I'll put mine here, the one in my living room. And I'll change the curtains, these gray ones are so depressing. And in this corner I can put a wardrobe for my things. Esperanza closed the laptop. Her throat tightened. She got up, went to the kitchen, and poured herself some water. Drank slowly, small sips. Her mother-in-law was planning not just to move in. She wanted to remake the entire apartment to her liking. Throw out Esperanza's belongings, arrange her own. Live here as if it were her home, not someone else's. And Aurelio knew. He probably even approved. Esperanza returned to the bedroom and lay down. She stared at the ceiling, listening to her husband's steady breathing. It used to soothe her. Now it irritated her. She realized trust was broken. Whatever happened next, there was no going back. Aurelio had chosen a side. He had chosen his mother over his wife. And that meant Esperanza had to make her own choice too. The next morning, Monday, after Aurelio left for work, Esperanza checked the camera again. Remedios arrived exactly at 10. As always, she walked in confidently, took off her coat, went to the kitchen, and put the kettle on. But this time she did something new. She took a notebook out of her bag and placed it on the table, opened it and began writing something. Esperanza played the recording and zoomed in. On the notebook page were numbers, addresses, notes. Remedios wrote slowly, neatly. Then she raised her head and looked toward the camera, right into the lens. Esperanza jumped. For a second she thought her mother-in-law could see her. But Remedios simply smiled to herself, nodded, and continued writing. Half an hour later she gathered her things, put the notebook back in her bag, and left. Esperanza rewound the recording and paused on the moment when the notebook lay on the table. She tried to read the writing, but the quality wasn't good enough. Only a few words were clear: apartment, documents, transfer of ownership. Esperanza saved the recording and closed her laptop. She stood up and went to the window. Outside, it was raining, and the few pedestrians hurried under their umbrellas. Inside, everything tightened with rage and helplessness. Remedios acted openly, boldly, without fear of consequences, because she knew Aurelio was on her side. Because she was certain Esperanza couldn't do anything. But she was wrong, because Esperanza had something her mother-in-law didn't. The deed to the apartment, legal ownership, and the determination to defend what belonged to her by right. Esperanza took out her phone, opened her notes app, and began writing a plan. What she needed to do, where to go, what documents to prepare. She wrote slowly, thinking through every step. She understood one thing: talking was useless. Aurelio wouldn't hear her, and his mother wouldn't stop. So she had to act differently, firmly, decisively, without hesitation. And the first thing she needed was to wait for the right moment. Esperanza put her phone away, went back to her laptop, opened the folder with the recordings, and watched them all again. Every recording was evidence. Every scene was confirmation of what had been happening behind her back. Now she just had to wait. Wait for Remedios and Aurelio to make the next move. And they would, Esperanza was sure, because they thought she was weak, compliant, unable to fight back. But they were wrong. Esperanza wasn't like that. She was patient, and when her patience ran out, they would regret it. The week passed in tense anticipation. Esperanza went to work, came home, cooked dinner, talked with Aurelio about the weather and the news, everything as usual. But inside, she simmered. Every day she checked the camera recordings, watched her mother-in-law's visits, noted every detail. Remedios now came almost daily. Sometimes she stayed half an hour, sometimes 2. She brought more of her things. A couple of blouses she hung in the bedroom closet, shoes she placed in the hallway. She acted as if she had already moved in. She just hadn't announced it yet. Esperanza stayed silent, said nothing to Aurelio, showed no recordings, didn't start fights. She simply waited, because she sensed something was coming. Remedios and Aurelio were too confident, too calm. And when people are that confident, they make mistakes. And the mistake didn't take long. It happened on Wednesday evening. Esperanza came home around 6 as usual. She took off her coat, went to the kitchen. Aurelio was already home, sitting at the table, scrolling through his phone. He looked tense, almost nervous. "Hi." Esperanza set her bag on the chair and opened the fridge. "Will you have dinner?" "Wait." Aurelio lifted his head. "I need to talk to you." Esperanza froze. There was something new in his voice. Not guilt like before, but determination. "About what?" She slowly closed the fridge and turned around. Aurelio stood up, shoved his hands in his pockets. He looked her in the eyes and then looked away. "Mom is having a hard time alone. You know she lives in a one-room place, barely any space. And here we have a 2-bedroom, and it's just the 2 of us. I think it would be right if she moved in with us. For a while. Or permanently. Whatever works." Esperanza felt a cold wave wash over her. She expected something like this, but hearing it out loud still hurt. "This is my apartment, Aurelio. I bought it with my own money, and I don't want your mother living here." "See? I knew you'd say that." He ran his hand through his hair, agitated. "Esperanza, you can't be this cruel. She's my mother. She really is having a hard time, and we have plenty of space." "She is not having a hard time. She has her own apartment, and she's managing just fine. You don't know her." Aurelio's voice rose. "She's lonely, she's miserable, and you only think about yourself." Esperanza stepped back until she touched the table. Thoughts flashed through her mind one after another. So that was it. Remedios had set the stage, and now Aurelio was voicing their plan. Move his mother into Esperanza's home, push her out. Slowly, but surely. "I do not agree," Esperanza said quietly but firmly. "Tell her it's impossible." Aurelio clenched his fists. His face turned red. "I'm not asking for your permission. This is my decision. Mom will move in with us, period." "That is not your decision, Aurelio. The apartment is mine. You're only registered here, and I have every right to decide who lives here and who doesn't." He stepped toward her, and for a moment Esperanza thought he might raise his hand, but he only jabbed a finger in her direction. "You know what? I'm sick of you throwing that in my face. Yes, the apartment is yours, I get it, but we're a family, and in a family everything is shared. Or do you disagree with that?" "I agree." Esperanza straightened, crossed her arms over her chest. "But your mother is not our family. She's your mother, not mine, and I am not obligated to support her. No one's asking you to support her. She'll take care of herself. She'll just live here, that's all." "No, she won't." Aurelio turned, paced across the kitchen, and stopped by the window. He was silent for a few seconds. Then he turned back, and there was something new on his face. Something cold and unfamiliar. "Then I have news for you too. I'm tired of your moodiness. Tired of how you're always against my mother. Maybe we should separate altogether if you refuse to compromise?" Esperanza gave a small, dry laugh. "So that's it? Threatening me with divorce to scare me into agreeing?" She nodded. "Fine. Divorce me. But you're leaving the apartment to me, because it's mine." Aurelio's face twisted. "I'm not leaving you anything. We've been married for 3 years. This is marital property." "No." Esperanza pulled out her phone, opened her photos, and showed him the documents for the apartment. "I bought it before the marriage. I have all the papers. It's not subject to division, so you can go to your mother tomorrow if you want." Aurelio said nothing, staring at the phone screen. Then he turned away and walked back to the window. Esperanza could see how tense his shoulders were, how tightly his fists were clenched. "You'll regret this," he muttered without turning around. "Maybe." Esperanza put her phone away. "But not nearly as much as if I agreed to your plan." They didn't speak for the rest of the evening. Aurelio went to the bedroom, shut the door, and talked to someone on the phone, probably his mother. Esperanza stayed in the kitchen, sitting at the table, drinking tea. Inside she felt empty. Not hurt, not scared. Just empty. And she realized the marriage was over. It had ended long ago. They had simply pretended everything was fine. But now there was no point pretending anymore. The next day, Thursday, Esperanza woke to the sound of the front door slamming. Aurelio had left for work earlier than usual, without even saying goodbye. She got up, showered, dressed. Checked the camera. There were no recordings overnight. Remedios hadn't come. Esperanza called work to say she was sick. Then sat down at her computer and began researching. How do you change the locks in an apartment? How much does it cost? Can you change the building's entry code? It turned out you could. All it required was calling a locksmith and paying for the work. The building door code could be changed with a request from the residents if most agreed. But Esperanza knew the neighbors would support her. Many had seen Remedios wandering around the building, peeking into other people's mailboxes. No one liked her. Esperanza found a locksmith, called, and scheduled him for the next morning, Friday, at 10. He promised to come while everyone was at work. Then she began packing Aurelio's things, methodically, without rushing. His clothes from the closet went into large bags. His shoes into boxes. His razor, toothbrush, towel, she packed all of it into a separate bag. His documents in the bedside table, passport, driver's license, insurance papers, she put into a large envelope. She worked for several hours. By evening, a mountain of bags and boxes filled the hallway. Esperanza looked over the apartment. Clean. No trace of Aurelio. None of his belongings. Then she gathered Remedios' things. The robe from the bathroom, the slippers from the hallway, creams from the shelf, the blouses from the closet. She collected everything and packed it separately. She even found the notebook her mother-in-law had forgotten on the kitchen counter during her last visit. Esperanza flipped through it. Inside were notes about the apartment, renovation plans, calculations of various amounts. She photographed several pages, then put the notebook into the bag. By 8 in the evening everything was ready. The bags and boxes stood neatly arranged in the hallway. Esperanza walked around the apartment one more time, making sure she hadn't forgotten anything. No, everything was packed. She returned to the living room, sat on the couch, took out her phone, and opened Aurelio's contact. She began typing a message. Deleted it. Typed again. In the end she settled on something short. Your things are in the hallway. Pick them up tomorrow. She sent it. A minute later came his reply. What are you doing? Esperanza didn't answer. She put the phone on the table and stood up. She went to the kitchen, made tea, sat down, and looked out the window. It was getting dark. The streetlights were coming on. Her phone rang. Aurelio. She rejected the call. He called again. She rejected it again. Then came the messages, one after another. Esperanza, this isn't funny. Open the door, we need to talk. You have no right to kick me out of the house. Esperanza read them without replying. She finished her tea, washed the cup, put it on the shelf, then went to the bedroom and lay down. The phone kept ringing, but she simply turned off the sound. She fell asleep late, almost at dawn. Fragmented dreams drifted through her mind, anxious and jumbled. She woke to the doorbell ringing. She looked at the clock, 9:30. Esperanza got up, put on her robe, and went to the hallway. She looked through the peephole. Remedios stood there, wearing her coat and a shoulder bag. Her face was sour. Esperanza didn't open the door, just stood there watching through the peephole. Her mother-in-law rang again, waited, then knocked. Esperanza, open up, I know you're home. Remedios' voice was sharp. Esperanza stayed silent. Remedios waited a little longer, then rummaged through her bag, took out her phone, and dialed someone, probably Aurelio. Aurelio, she won't open. I'm standing at the door, ringing, and she won't open. What happened yesterday? You said she threw your things out. Is that true? A pause. Remedios listened, nodding. All right, I'll wait. Get here quickly. She put her phone away and knocked again. Esperanza, come on, let's talk calmly. I'm not to blame for you and Aurelio fighting. Come on, open up. We'll discuss everything peacefully. Esperanza turned away and went to the kitchen. She put the kettle on, took out a mug. Her mother-in-law kept ringing and pounding on the door, but Esperanza ignored her. At exactly 10 the doorbell rang again. Esperanza checked the peephole, the locksmith. She opened the door and let him in. Good morning, you ordered a lock change? Yes, please come in. The locksmith stepped inside, looked around, noticed the bags and boxes in the hallway, but said nothing. Esperanza led him to the door and showed him the locks. We need to replace both, and preferably install ones that are hard to duplicate. No problem, the locksmith nodded, pulling tools from his bag. Give me about 40 minutes and it'll all be done. Esperanza went back to the kitchen and finished her tea. She heard the drilling, the knocking, the soft mumbling of the locksmith at work. Half an hour later he called out to her. All done. Here are the keys. 3 sets for each lock. Please check them. Esperanza tested the new keys, opening and closing the door. The locks worked perfectly, smooth and silent. Great. How much do I owe you? He named the price. She paid him and walked him to the door. He left, wishing her good luck. Esperanza closed the door and turned the key. The new lock clicked softly, securely. Now all that was left was to wait for the evening. The day crawled by. Esperanza worked on a translation, stopping now and then to glance at her phone. Aurelio kept sending messages one after another, demanding explanations, threatening her. Remedios wrote too, but her tone was different, syrupy, almost sweet. She pleaded, coaxed, begged Esperanza to open the door, promised she'd fix everything. Esperanza didn't reply to a single message. She just read them and deleted them. At 6 in the evening she began carrying the bags and boxes out. She went up and down the stairs, setting everything neatly on the landing between the second and third floors, bags of clothes, boxes of shoes, small items, all arranged so they wouldn't block the passage. When the last bag was outside, Esperanza returned to the apartment and locked the door. She went to the living room, sat by the window, and checked her phone. 6:30. Aurelio would be back from work soon. She watched the street below. A few people hurried home. Cars passed. Just another ordinary evening. At 7 o'clock Remedios' car pulled up. Her old, rickety vehicle she had bought 10 years ago. Remedios got out, looked around the entrance. She tried entering the door code, but it didn't work. Esperanza had managed to have it changed that morning, with help from a neighbor on the first floor. Remedios stood there, nervously lit a cigarette. Esperanza watched her from the window. The woman made a phone call, waving her free hand in agitation, clearly upset. Half an hour later Aurelio arrived. Esperanza recognized his dark blue car. He got out, walked over to his mother. They talked for a moment, then he tried the building door. The code didn't work. He frowned, tried again. Still nothing. Remedios grabbed his arm, talking fast, pointing at the entrance. Aurelio pulled out his phone, started calling. Probably Esperanza. She watched the screen light up with an incoming call but didn't pick up. Aurelio tried calling neighbors to buzz them in, but no one answered or no one wanted to help, knowing what was going on. Esperanza had warned a few of them, explained the situation. Most supported her. After a few minutes, Aurelio finally managed to get inside. Someone was leaving the building, and he slipped in. Remedios followed him. Esperanza heard their footsteps on the stairs, coming closer to the third floor. Then a shrill cry. Aurelio! Aurelio! Look! Esperanza stepped to the door and peered through the peephole. Aurelio stood on the landing, staring at the pile of belongings stacked along the wall. Remedios was beside him, pale, eyes wide. Are these our things? Aurelio's voice sounded confused. Yes. She put everything out. Everything. Remedios grabbed one of the bags and looked inside. These are my blouses and shoes. Has she lost her mind? Aurelio moved to the door, tried to open it with his keys. The key didn't fit. He tried again, harder. No use. Esperanza. He slammed his fist against the door. Open. Right now. Esperanza stood still behind the door, silent. Esperanza, I know you're in there. Open the door or I'll break it down. Aurelio, maybe we should call the police. Remedios' voice was trembling. She changed the locks illegally. It's her apartment, Mom. Aurelio spoke quietly, but Esperanza could hear everything. She has every right. What do you mean, her apartment? You live here. You're registered here. That means nothing. Esperanza heard Remedios begin to cry. Loud, dramatic sobs, complaining about injustice, calling Esperanza cruel and heartless. Aurelio hit the door again. Esperanza, stop acting crazy. Open up, we can talk like adults. Silence. Esperanza. Esperanza reached for her phone and typed a message. Short, clear. You don't need keys. Take your things. Now you can call and ask to be let in if I ever decide to open the door. She sent it. She heard Aurelio's phone ring behind the door. He read the message and froze. She's serious, he whispered. Remedios grabbed his arm. What? What did she say? Aurelio showed her the screen. Remedios read it and went even paler. No, this can't be. Aurelio, do something. What do you want me to do? Aurelio's voice cracked. It's her apartment. I'm nobody there. But you're her husband. You have rights. I don't have any rights, Mom. Don't you get it? None. She bought the place before the marriage. With her money. I'm just registered there. That's it. Remedios sank onto one of the bags, covering her face with her hands. She cried loudly, desperately, like a child. Aurelio stood beside her, staring helplessly at the door. Then he started calling Esperanza again. Once, twice, 3 times. She rejected every call. Esperanza, please, he said into the phone, even though he knew she wasn't listening. Let's talk. I get it now, I was wrong. Just open the door. But Esperanza didn't open the door. She stood behind it, leaning her back against the wall, and listened as he pleaded, as his mother cried, as the two of them slowly realized what had happened. After a few minutes, neighbors began appearing on the stairs. Senora Consuelo from the 3rd floor, an elderly woman from the 1st, a young couple from the 2nd. All of them looked at Aurelio, at the sobbing Remedios, at the mountain of belongings. What's going on here? Asked Senora Consuelo, though everything was obvious. She kicked us out. Aurelio waved his hand toward the door. She changed the locks and threw our things out. Senora Consuelo let out a short laugh. And you, Remedios, do you happen to know whose name the apartment is in? The mother-in-law lifted her tear-stained face. What difference does that make? They're family, husband and wife. It makes a big difference. Senora Consuelo crossed her arms. Esperanza bought that apartment herself, long before the wedding. She worked, she saved, she paid off the loan. And you, she nodded toward the bags, you decided to settle in already, from what I can see. I've watched you sneaking around here often enough. I was helping, I was cleaning. Cleaning, sure, Senora Consuelo snorted. You were rummaging through other people's things, that's what. The neighbor from the 1st floor saw you peeking into mailboxes too. Thought no one would notice? Remedios opened her mouth, wanting to say something, but no words came. She looked at her son, but he turned away. Take your things and go, said Senora Consuelo. The girl did the right thing. No need to stick your nose into someone else's home. She turned and went back inside. The other neighbors left too, whispering among themselves. Aurelio and his mother were left alone. Aurelio. Remedios grabbed his hand. What are we going to do? Where will we go? Aurelio said nothing. Then he slowly began gathering the bags, loading them into his arms one by one. We'll go to your place, Mom. Where else? But it's only one room. We'll be cramped. We'll manage. He picked up several bags and headed toward the stairs. Come on, no point standing here. Remedios stood up, wiped her tears, took her things, glanced one last time at the door, then followed him. Esperanza heard them going down the stairs, heard the entrance door slam. She walked to the window and looked out. She saw them loading the bags into Aurelio's car. Saw Remedios get into the passenger seat, still sniffling. Saw Aurelio start the engine. The car pulled away and drove off. Esperanza watched until it disappeared around the corner. Then she returned to the living room and sat on the couch. The apartment was quiet. No strange sounds, no voices. Only the ticking of the clock on the wall. Esperanza took out her phone and opened the camera recordings. The latest one was from that morning, when Remedios had come. She scrolled through it and stopped at the moment when her mother-in-law stood in the living room, talking to herself. It's fine, soon everything will be the way I want. Aurelio will convince her. And if he doesn't, we'll find our own way. Esperanza turned off the recording, saved the file, closed the laptop. Now Remedios and Aurelio sat crammed in a tiny one-room apartment on the edge of town, thinking about the mistake they had made. And Esperanza sat in her own apartment, bought with her own money, feeling relief. She got up, went to the kitchen, made tea, poured it into her favorite cup with blue flowers, sat at the table, and looked out the window. It was fully dark outside, the streetlights glowing. In the distance she heard the noise of cars, voices of passers-by. Ordinary life going on as usual, and Esperanza sat in her kitchen, drinking tea, thinking about the many difficulties ahead. The divorce, paperwork, arguments. But none of it was scary anymore, because she knew the apartment would remain hers. The documents were in order, the law was on her side. And she also knew she would never again let anyone decide for her who could enter her home and who could not. This was her fortress, her space, and she would protect it at any cost. Esperanza finished her tea, washed her cup, put it on the shelf, went to the bedroom and lay down, closed her eyes. For the first time in many weeks, she fell asleep peacefully. Esperanza woke up early, even though she hadn't set an alarm. She simply opened her eyes, looked at the ceiling, and realized she didn't want to sleep anymore. The room was quiet, and outside the window daylight was just beginning. She lay there a little longer, listening to the silence, and it felt strangely pleasant. Knowing no one would barge into the apartment, rifle through her things, walk around as if the place belonged to them. She got up, put on her robe, went to the kitchen, set the kettle to boil, took out her blue-flowered cup, sat at the table, watching the sky slowly brighten outside. Just an ordinary Thursday morning. But somehow everything felt different. Her phone lay on the table, the screen lighting up now and then with incoming messages. Esperanza picked it up and scrolled through them. 23 missed calls from Aurelio, 8 from Remedios. The messages came in one after another, long and frantic. The first ones had been written late at night. Esperanza, come on, this is crazy, we can talk everything through. I didn't mean to hurt you, Mom really is alone, and I thought we could help her. Do you really think I wanted to throw you out? It's your apartment, I get that, just let's talk calmly. Then the tone changed. You don't have the right to do this to me. I'm your husband. Is it even legal to change the locks while I'm at work? I could go to the police. Where am I supposed to live now? With Mom, in a tiny one-room flat for the two of us? Do you even understand what you're doing? Messages from Remedios were different. First pitiful. Esperanza, sweetheart, why are you being like this? I didn't mean anything bad. I just wanted to help you too, you're young. Aurelio is so worried. He didn't sleep all night, he's a wreck. Don't you feel sorry for him? We're family. How can you fight over such silly things? Then threatening. You'll regret this. You think you can get rid of your husband that easily? We'll find lawyers, you'll answer for everything. Aurelio has a right to half the apartment. You were married for 3 years, it's marital property. I'll get justice one way or another. Don't think you'll get away with it. Esperanza read all of it and felt a strange calm rise inside her. Not anger, not hurt, just a solid certainty that she had done the right thing. They threatened, demanded, accused, but none of it mattered anymore. Because the apartment documents were in the safe, the locks were changed, and she had more than enough proof of what had been happening behind her back. She put the phone aside and finished her tea, got dressed, cleaned herself up. She was about to sit down to work when the door phone rang again. Not the mobile, the intercom. Esperanza picked up the receiver. On the other end was the anxious voice of Señora Consuelo. Esperanza, dear, your folks are down by the entrance. Well, your husband and his mother. Again. They say you didn't return all their things and demand to be let in. I didn't open the door, but they've been standing there for half an hour. The neighbors are getting annoyed. Esperanza sighed. Thank you for letting me know. I'll come down. She put on her sneakers, took her keys, stepped out onto the landing, and went downstairs. The building's entrance hall was empty, only muffled voices sounded from outside. Esperanza pushed the door open and stepped out. Aurelio and Remedios were standing by the entrance. He looked exhausted, wrinkled shirt, unshaven face, red eyes. He really must not have slept all night. His mother-in-law wore the same coat as yesterday, her hair messy, dark circles under her eyes. On the bench near the entrance sat the neighbor from the first floor, Señora Amparo, watching with open curiosity. Aurelio saw Esperanza and hurried toward her. Finally, I've been standing here for an hour trying to get through to you. Esperanza stopped 2 meters away, arms crossed. What do you want? What do you mean, what? He looked at her as if confused. Esperanza, enough of this circus already. Let's talk normally, like adults. Fine. Talk. Not out here. He glanced at the neighbor, who was very obviously listening. Let's go inside the apartment and talk calmly. No, Esperanza shook her head. Out here is fine. Say what you came to say. Aurelio rubbed his face, sighing heavily. Esperanza, I know I overreacted yesterday. I shouldn't have been so harsh. About my mom and everything. But you know me. I just worry about her. She's alone. It's really hard for her. She has her own apartment. Well, yeah, she does. But it's small, the place is old. And we have a 2-bedroom, lots of space. I just thought we could. No, Esperanza cut him off. We couldn't. This is my apartment, Aurelio. Mine, understand? I bought it with my money. I pay the bills. I live there. And I decide who can enter and who cannot. Remedios, who had been silent until then, snapped. You're selfish. She stepped forward, glaring at Esperanza. Selfish and cold-hearted. You only think about yourself. And we. When you came into my apartment without permission, rummaged through my things, took my earrings, my perfume, my money, who were you thinking about then? Esperanza looked at her calmly. The mother-in-law's face went pale. I didn't take anything. You did. Esperanza took out her phone and opened the folder with the recordings. I have it all on video. Want to watch? She held out the phone. On the screen was the camera footage, Remedios standing in the living room, holding the perfume bottle, spraying it on her wrist, saying, Nice. I'll take it. Aurelio stared at the screen in silence. His face shifted, disbelief, confusion, then something like shame. Remedios tugged on his sleeve. It's edited. She faked this. Mom, shut up. Aurelio said it quietly but sharply. Esperanza was surprised. He had never spoken to his mother like that before. Remedios fell silent, took a step back. Her face twisted, as if she were going to cry but forced herself not to. Esperanza fast-forwarded the video, stopped at the moment where Remedios lay on the bed, saying, Soon all this will be mine. Aurelio will divorce that splinter, and I'll move in here. So this is edited too? Esperanza looked at Aurelio. He said nothing. He stared at the screen, then at his mother, then at the screen again. Then he turned away, walked a few steps off to the side, and stopped. Standing with his back toward them, shoulders slumped. I didn't know, he said at last. I didn't know that she said that. But you knew you gave her the keys. Esperanza put her phone away. You knew she came when I wasn't home. You knew and you never told me. I thought she was just helping. He turned around, his voice cracking. Esperanza, really? I thought she was cleaning, cooking. I didn't know she was taking things, planning everything. And when I told you money and earrings went missing, what did you say? Aurelio stayed silent. You said I must have spent them or misplaced them, Esperanza said slowly and clearly. You defended her. Not me. You chose her side. She's my mother. And I'm your wife. Esperanza raised her voice, making a few passers-by turn their heads. Was your wife. But you decided she was more important. That her word meant more than mine. That you could hand her keys to my apartment without asking me. That you could demand she move in without even checking if I wanted that. Aurelio turned away again. Remedios stood next to him, staring down at the ground. Her face was white, her lips pressed tight. And one more thing, Esperanza took out her phone again and opened a photo. This is a page from your notebook, Remedios. You left it in my kitchen. Right here you wrote, re-register apartment. Ask a lawyer if possible after 3 years of marriage. Want to explain what that means? The mother-in-law jerked, clutching her purse. Give me that notebook. It's mine. The notebook is in the trash, Esperanza said calmly. But the photos are with me, just in case. If you ever decide to go to court, I'll have something to show. Remedios opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. She turned to her son. Aurelio, say something to her. You're a man. She can't talk to us like this. Aurelio slowly raised his head, looked at his mother, then at Esperanza. His face was tired, sunken. Mom, let's go. He took her by the arm. There's nothing for us here. What do you mean, nothing? Remedios tore her arm away. You agree with her throwing us out? It's your apartment too. No, Mom, Aurelio shook his head. It's her apartment. It always was. I just lived there on paper. She has every right to decide who lives there. But we're family. We were family. He looked at Esperanza. Now, I guess we're not. Esperanza nodded. Something tightened inside, but she didn't show it. Are we getting a divorce? Aurelio asked quietly. Yes. Are you going to claim any of my property? No. The apartment is mine. The car is yours. That's fair. He nodded, letting out a breath, relieved. He had expected worse. All right. I'll file the paperwork. Next week. Go ahead. Esperanza turned and walked toward the entrance. Esperanza. Remedios called after her. Her voice was cracked, almost hysterical. You'll regret this. You'll end up alone, without a husband, without a family. You'll live in that apartment of yours like in a cage. Esperanza stopped and looked back. You know, Remedios, I'd rather live alone in my own apartment than with people who rummage through my things and plan how to push me out of my own home. So don't worry about me. I'll manage. She entered the building code and stepped inside. The door closed behind her. Esperanza climbed to the third floor, opened her door with the new keys, walked in, and locked it behind her. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. No voices, no footsteps, no intruding sounds. Only the ticking of the clock and the faint murmur of cars outside. Esperanza took off her coat and went to the bedroom. She lay down, closed her eyes. Inside was a strange feeling. Not joy, not sadness. Something in between. Relief, maybe. And exhaustion. A deep, bone-heavy exhaustion. She lay there for half an hour. Then she got up, washed her face, got herself together, sat at her computer and opened her work file. She needed to finish a translation by the end of the week, and she had been distracted by everything that happened. She worked until evening, pausing only for tea and a light snack. Her phone stayed silent. Neither Aurelio nor Remedios called or texted again. They must have realized it was pointless. By 7, Esperanza finished the translation and sent it to the client. She leaned back, stretching. Outside it was already dark, only the desk lamp lit the room. She got up, turned on the living room light, and went to the kitchen. She opened the fridge, scanned the shelves. She didn't feel like cooking, but she needed to eat something. She took out eggs, bread, a tomato. She made a quick omelet and brewed tea, sat down and ate slowly, unhurried, looked out at the city lights and the few people walking down the street. It felt strange realizing that at this time yesterday Aurelio had been sitting across from her, eating dinner, talking about work, and today he was gone and wouldn't be back. Esperanza tried to feel sad, but couldn't. Inside was emptiness, but not the painful kind. Just emptiness that time would eventually fill. After dinner she washed the dishes, tidied the kitchen, went to the living room, sat on the couch, turned on the TV. She flipped through channels, nothing catching her attention. Turned it off again, pulled out her phone, opened the photo folder, scrolled through old pictures. The wedding, trips to the countryside, holidays. Aurelio smiling in every photo, hugging her, looking happy. Was it real? Or had he always been the type to choose his mother over his wife? Esperanza didn't know, and, honestly, didn't want to know anymore. She deleted a few photos, then changed her mind and restored them. Let them stay. They were part of her life, and pretending otherwise would be foolish. She put down the phone and stood up, went to the bathroom and took a shower. She stayed under the hot water for a long time, feeling the tension of the last days wash away. Then she dried off, put on pajamas, and went to bed. Lay down, pulled the blanket over herself. Her gaze fell on the empty nightstand. Aurelio used to keep his things there, his phone charging, the book he could never finish. Now it was empty. Esperanza closed her eyes. Tomorrow would be a new day. She'd need to take care of divorce paperwork, talk to a lawyer, sort out Aurelio's registration. Lots of things to do, lots of forms. But that was for later. Now she just needed to sleep. She turned on her side, found a comfortable position. Sleep came slowly, gently, like sinking into warm water. The next morning, Friday, Esperanza woke to the sound of the doorbell. She opened her eyes, glanced at the clock, 9:30. She got up, pulled on her robe, went to the door and looked through the peephole. Señora Consuelo stood outside holding a box. Esperanza opened the door. "Good morning." Señora Consuelo smiled. "I didn't wake you, did I?" No, I'm already up. I brought you a pie. Baked it this morning, with apples. I figured you might not be up for cooking, so I thought I'd bring you a treat." Esperanza took the box, touched by the gesture. "Thank you so much. That's really kind." "Oh, think nothing of it, dear." Señora Consuelo patted her hand. "You stay strong, all right? I saw everything yesterday, how you spoke to them. Good for you. Someone like that shouldn't be indulged. Thank you, Esperanza smiled. Thank you for the support. If you need anything, come by. I'm on the 3rd floor, always home. We'll talk, have some tea. I'll definitely stop by. Senora Consuelo left, and Esperanza closed the door, went to the kitchen, and opened the box. Inside was a large apple pie, still warm, the crust golden. It smelled of cinnamon and caramel. Esperanza cut a slice and put it on a plate. Brewed coffee, sat down. She ate slowly, enjoying every bite. The pie was delicious, homemade, and real. She hadn't tasted anything like it in a long time. She usually cooked for herself or grabbed something quick from the store. But this was a pie baked with care, brought by a neighbor who genuinely wanted to help. She finished her coffee, cleaned up, got dressed, and sat at her computer. She needed to find a lawyer for divorce consultation. She found several contacts, called, and booked an appointment for the following week. Then she got to work. A new order had arrived, a contract translation, urgent but well paid. Esperanza accepted and started working. She sank into the text, everything else fading into the background. She worked until lunch, then reheated last night's omelet, ate, and returned to work. By evening the translation was halfway done. Esperanza saved the file, closed the laptop, stood up and stretched. Her back was stiff from sitting, her eyes tired. She went to the living room and looked out the window. It was a typical Friday evening. People returning from work, hurrying somewhere. Esperanza watched them and thought about how everyone had their own life, their own problems and joys. And she would now have her own life too. Without a husband who chose his mother over his wife. Without a mother-in-law who rifled through her belongings and plotted a takeover. Esperanza suddenly laughed quietly to herself. A takeover. As if this were a military operation. And for Remedios, maybe it had been. She had planned, acted, gathered intel. She just hadn't accounted for one thing, that Esperanza had not only the deed to the apartment, but also a backbone. Her phone buzzed. Esperanza picked it up and checked the screen. A message from Aurelio. Esperanza, I filed for divorce. The court date is in a month. Are you willing to go through with a simple divorce without disputes? I won't claim anything. We'll just end it. Esperanza replied briefly. Agreed. A minute later another message came. All right. Sorry for everything. She didn't reply. She set the phone on the windowsill and looked outside again. Sorry for everything. 3 words that should have meant something, but didn't, because it was too late. Esperanza stepped back from the window and went to the kitchen. She cut another slice of apple pie and brewed tea. Sat down, eating slowly, thinking about the future. What would she do now? Work, definitely. There were always orders, the money was steady. Maybe she'd take a vacation once the divorce was finalized. She hadn't been anywhere farther than the countryside in ages. Or she could sign up for some classes. Learn another language, maybe. Or pick up a new skill. Drawing, for example. Or dancing. Why not? Esperanza finished her tea and smiled at her own thoughts. Dancing. She, who had always been stiff and awkward at any party, going to take dance classes. But why not, really? Now she had time. And space. And no one would stand over her shoulder, demanding she do this or that. She stood, washed the dishes, went to the living room, and turned on some music. Soft, calm music. She sat on the couch, picked up the book she had been putting off for ages, opened it to her bookmark, and began to read. Outside, night settled in completely. The apartment felt quiet and cozy. Esperanza read, pausing only for tea and short breaks. She read until late at night, until her eyes began to close on their own. She set the book aside, got up, went to the bedroom, lay down, pulled the blanket over herself, and closed her eyes. She fell asleep quickly, peacefully, without anxious thoughts. And in the morning, Saturday, she woke with the simple feeling that life was going on, and that this was normal. Right. Esperanza got up, showered, dressed, had breakfast, drank her coffee. She sat at her computer, finished the translation, sent it to the client, received payment, transferred the money to her account. Then she cleaned the apartment, wiped dust, vacuumed, mopped the floors, rearranged a few things, put the photos with Aurelio away in a distant drawer, and hung a new painting she had bought long ago but never managed to put up. By noon the apartment looked refreshed. Bright, clean, cozy. Esperanza walked through the rooms, inspecting the result. She nodded to herself, pleased. Then she remembered Senora Consuelo. She had invited her for tea. Why not? Esperanza changed clothes, went down to the 3rd floor, and rang the doorbell. Senora Consuelo opened and brightened immediately. Oh, Esperanza, come in, come in. I just put the kettle on. Esperanza entered. The apartment was small but very cozy. Flowers on the windowsills, crocheted doilies on the table, photos of grandchildren on the walls. Senora Consuelo sat her down at the table, poured tea, brought out cookies. They talked about everything. The weather, the neighbors, work. Senora Consuelo talked about her grandchildren and showed photos. Esperanza listened, smiled, feeling a warm glow spreading inside her. And don't you worry about the divorce, Senora Consuelo said as she poured more tea. It's not the end. It's the beginning of a new life. You'll see. Everything will settle. Thank you, Esperanza nodded. I'm not too worried. It's just a bit unfamiliar, that's all. You'll get used to it, Senora Consuelo patted her hand. You're young, pretty, smart. You'll find someone better. And that one can live with his mommy if that's what he wants. Esperanza laughed. Senora Consuelo smiled too. They sat for another hour, talking about everything and nothing. Then Esperanza said goodbye, went back upstairs, entered her apartment, closed the door. Silence, calm, and a faint, barely noticeable feeling that everything would be all right. Esperanza went to the kitchen, brewed tea, sat at the table, and looked out the window. A light rain was falling, drops sliding down the glass. The city lived its life, and Esperanza lived hers. She finished her tea, washed the cup, put it on the shelf, took her phone and messaged a friend she hadn't spoken to in a long time. Suggested meeting over the weekend, going to the movies, or just taking a walk. Her friend replied almost immediately. Of course, let's go tomorrow afternoon, I've missed you. Esperanza smiled. Tomorrow. There would be tomorrow, and the day after, and many others. There would be work, meeting friends, maybe new hobbies. There would be a life in which she herself decided what to do, where to go, whom to talk to. She put down the phone and stood, went to the living room and turned on some music. Then she walked to the window, opened it, letting in fresh air. She stood there for a moment, breathing in the smell of rain, listening to the hum of the city. And everything felt right.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.